Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt, back in action. Going to go over the AFC East talk. What's going to go on around the AFC East? Are there going to be big signings for any of these AFC East teams? Do we see Dalvin Cook? Do we see DeAndre Hopkins in one of these uniforms here in the AFC? So we have a lot to talk about today as we're approaching training camp in just over 2 weeks. So we'll be right back.
Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop, deep throw, and it is hauled in for the touchdown. Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action. Allen deep downfield, wide open.
Wow, what an action-packed July. The weather's nice. We're back with you on a Tuesday, 7 o'clock edition, and I am happy to be back after a few-week hiatus here with Mike. Mike, how you doing today on this beautiful July summer?
I'm doing great today, Kevin. It's beautiful. Got back from vacation last week. I'm refreshed. You got a few weeks off from the show. Just ready to talk some football with you. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. July is always a slow time, but it's always an exciting time. And that leads me to some of my takes around the AFC East that I'm going to get into. Some of my best takes, I think, are around the AFC East. Everybody knows how I feel about some of those AFC South teams. I don't think it's going to be as cut and dry as others do around the AFC South. But maybe that's a topic for next week's show, Mike. Maybe we'll get into more around the AFC, not as it pertains to just the AFC East. But there is some interesting news. Jeff Darlington today stating that the Bills would go after DeAndre Hopkins, still very interested in him. Seen some rumblings around Twitter already today about the Bills staying engaged with DeAndre Hopkins if he's willing to chase a ring and take this reduction. I mean, the saga continues. It's definitely was always going to continue once it didn't get a resolution in the first week. It was always going to continue into the late July portion. Probably might find its resolution, I would guess, in the next couple of weeks. But, Mike, what's kind of your opinion on that kind of slight bomb as you woke up this morning?
I feel like the national media is just catching up to what you and I and most Bills fans have thought for the past month plus at this point in time. Really, we've been saying all along that we didn't really think that he wanted to go to New England or Tennessee, but that those were the two teams that were whining and dining and offering him the best opportunity to make some money, but that the Bills and probably Kansas City would always be in the background saying, hey, if you want to go to a contender, we're still here. We can't give you the same money as those other two teams, but if you want to get that ring, we'll give you an opportunity on either of our teams. So to me, this wasn't really anything new. It was more of now the national media kind of is presenting what you and I have speculated for the last maybe month and a half.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, it makes sense, right? Like who would want to, and at his stage of his career, I mean, you're looking like, he keeps referencing Odell Beckham Jr. in a way of money and other things. And Odell Beckham Jr. did select a team where he thought's at least fairly competitive, does have an opportunity to kind of make a push. Can they get by Cincinnati and Baltimore? Not sure. Can they get by Kansas City, Buffalo? They've been known to be competitive, especially with Lamar Jackson. So I do believe that was a good selection to go be receiver one in Baltimore. But DeAndre Hopkins wants to follow suit. Does he want to go to the Tennessee Titans, who I've seen in ranking as low as 13th, 14th in the AFC? That's tough for me. Does he want to go to the fourth best team in the AFC East as we talk about the AFC East today? I don't think so. Other than, Bill O'Brien there, there's been talks about maybe Bill O'Brien could unleash him. Maybe Bill O'Brien had falling out with him. There's been so many conflicting things that I've read about who was at fault there back, in Houston. So, Mike, like that's got to be the truth where he's looking at potentially teams at the bottom of their divisions of an already loaded AFC. Either he wants to go play in an NFC team that could be competitive, which doesn't look like there's any options, or he's going to always want to see what the Bills and Chiefs have to offer.
Yeah, and this is going to come down to what we always thought. Do you want the money or do you want to be on a competitor? Now, you and I have had this talk plenty of times over the last month plus where we have said a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, if a team like New England or Tennessee throw a bag of money at him, he could probably talk himself into, well, both of these teams were playing in week 18 of last year with a chance to make the playoffs with a win. I go to either of these teams, I add them a dynamic weapon. Maybe I could be the guy that gets them into the playoffs, and he could frame it that way. But I think you and I both agree that's pretty much not the case. Even if you add DeAndre Hopkins to either of those squads, they're not suddenly contenders. Maybe they could squeak out 9 wins, 10 wins, sneak into the playoffs as a wild card, or in Tennessee's example, maybe they get past Jacksonville in a weak AFC South. But those teams aren't competing for anything more than maybe getting a slightly above 500. The Bills and the Chiefs, those are championship opportunities. So we're going to find out, is it about the money or is it about winning? And at the end of the day, none of us really know that answer right now. I think we're all speculating that he hasn't gone to Tennessee or New England at this point because he is hoping that there's a better team out there or a contender that will eventually come forward and give him some money, whether that be the Bills and Chiefs or someone else who might have a wide receiver need if there's an injury early in training camp or something else that happens.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of talks about not wanting him on the Chiefs. It's a good point. Where the Bills bid, the Bills could be one of the only trump cards there, so they might have to get aggressive for that purpose alone and take him away from a competitor, take him out of the division. There's a couple of thoughts there. Do they really care if he goes to Tennessee or Cleveland? Probably not. Do they care if he maybe a little bit more about New England and maybe even a lot more about Kansas City? Probably. So I think that there's definitely something to be said about keeping him off the Chiefs if they can do it. So we'll have to see what happens in regards to, will the Bills get competitive once the market heats up a little bit? Is he not on a team already because he's waiting for money, or is he not on a team already because he's looking for his options from a winning team? You can look at it both ways. So he could be waiting to see who gives him the best opportunity of money reign combination. And there's no reason he needs to accept that before 2 weeks from now. There's no reason. There's no reason he needs to make that decision yesterday if he doesn't get both money and ring possibilities. Might as well wait it out to see what happens. Someone could show up hurt in the camp. Someone could get hurt very early on or show up going on PUP. There's a lot of options here for Hopkins. One where he really doesn't need to make a big decision much before August 1st. So we'll see what comes over the next 2 to 3 weeks as he, already probably got to enjoy his spring, summer off, and then going into the fall where he probably wants to now start to be engaged in that team as he's gotten to miss and rehab and feel better throughout the spring. So I do believe that could be happening as well. So I think the Bills and the Chiefs probably are always there. There's the Chris Jones restructure that the Chiefs could do. Then this much talked about Chris Jones restructure. Could they do something with Mahomes' contract? We've heard a lot about, the Bills and Josh Allen and his contract status. Now that's already down, not even in the top 10 in many regards. So there's some very interesting restructures that the Bills could do with Trey White. Do they do something with Deion Dawkins? That all has to do with, we heard here at Cover One that they were interested in potentially looking through his medicals after his first year to see if there's a potential of assuming there to move some money down the line for Trey White. So we'll see if that comes into fold here for Gabe Davis extension or DeAndre Hopkins signing, Mike. But I got to get into AFC East talk as it's all relevant here today. Start with New England. Let's start at New England. They've been the team most rumored to want to make an addition of DeAndre Hopkins. By all accounts, maybe they're the leaders in the clubhouse, I guess. But they also have Mac Jones, fourth in the AFC East, I would believe, on 99.9% of people's rankings. They need a splash move like DeAndre Hopkins to try to keep up, maybe more so than some other teams. So what's your take on New England? Are they just trying to stay afloat, be scary to some of these AFC East teams, do their usual 8 to 9 win team thing now? Where do you stand on the New England Patriots as it comes to now a very competitive AFC East and AFC?
Yeah, I think they're clearly the fourth best team in the division right now. So at the bottom, looking up And that doesn't mean that they're horrendous. I don't think the Patriots are ever going to be like a 3-4 win team and bottom out like some of the worst teams in football. But I think they're not near the level of the Bills. And I wouldn't even say, I would say they're a tier down from what the Dolphins and the Jets are at this current moment. New England had a solid defense last year. A lot of people overlook what New England was defensively. The defensive DVOA, they were number 3rd in the league. They were a spot ahead of Buffalo last year. So New England returns a good defense, and they did make some splash moves in the offseason, bringing in Mike Gesicki and Juju Smith-Schuster. So there is some reasons for optimism if you're a Patriots fan. But some of this talk from Mike Tannenbaum of if they add DeAndre Hopkins, they are now the favorites in the AFC East. That's just some garbage clickbait material from a former GM who should say more intelligent things on television. I honestly thought that was some stupidity from him. Whether he means it or not, I still couldn't believe that came from his mouth. And I will say this. I go into this year thinking the Patriots, most likely, they're probably a 7-win team, maybe an 8-win team. If in this division, nothing's going to come easy for them. Mac Jones is going to need to take a large step for them to be competitive and have a chance to be in the top half of this division. So while I understand some of the optimism, 2 tight ends with Gesicki, Hunter Henry, adding Juju Smith-Schuster, I just don't think it's going to be enough in the AFC East this year.
And how many restructures would it take to offer him the OBJ deal? Just one. Just Trey White. It doesn't take much. The OBJ deal was many void years down the road, kicking the can down the road. Void years, just to be clear on void years, they do give you placeholders, so an option to re-sign that player. So in OBJ's case, he's a little younger. The Ravens may feel like they can re-sign OBJ. So whether it's, New England can get a little bit crazier. They can offer him more this year and maybe less void years, maybe like 1 void year. But when it comes to the majority of these playoff teams / championship level teams, they're going to have to put void years in. You're restructuring Trey on his own, and then you're freeing up enough money to do a couple of void years and probably only count $5 million against the cap this year, probably $2 million against the cap, $2 to $3 million against the cap each additional year. And however much money he gets would be how many years that would be. So if it's, I don't believe he's going to get the OBJ deal. There's still some rumors that, there's some interest. Can he still run the routes level? He still has his hands. He's still a great receiver, but can he still get open like he's been able to? That's always been a pivotal thing for him. So that's what playoff teams / the rest of the league is going to have to determine with how much to give him when it comes to this. But Mike, your opinion on the Patriots is pretty spot on. They did sign someone I really enjoyed, drafted Christian Gonzalez in the first round. I think he's going to be a menace to that already always good New England secondary. It wouldn't be New England without a good secondary. Kyle Duggar's there, a guy that many Bills fans wanted as that big nickel at one point. Now he's a starting safety there. Adrian Phillips has had a good career. Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, Jabril Peppers, Jalen Mills. So it's a pretty solid stacked DB unit there. The rest of their front seven's always fairly solid. Juwan Bentley, Matt Judon, Christian Barmore. There's no one scary on that front seven, but it's just solid. So they can definitely usually overcome injuries. They do face injuries and they overcome them defensively. They just have loads of similar talent behind it. Keon White, they drafted Lawrence Guy, Josh Uche. Like they always have just loads of guys that are very similar. So they don't really have that high end beside Matt Judon, that high end front seven player, but they always seem to have very good. They can get away with an injury, unlike some teams, especially on their defense. They have some depth there. They build a really deep unit. Mike Clay has them as a 7-win team. So we use Mike Clay a little bit because he projects players and generally pretty unbiased, use some statistical models. It's not just, usually he tries not to just be opinion based. So I don't agree with a lot of Mike Clay's like individual takes, but like his large takes as a whole are very interesting. He does a good job with win probability. The Patriots are only favored in 4 games this year, Mike. So that's, to me, challenging. Like regardless of what you think of Mac Jones, doesn't really matter. It's a challenging year for that team. 4 games, that's it.
And Kev, that's why the Tannenbaum take is even dumber when you reflect about it. Model says they're going to win 7 games according to the talent on their team, and you're going to say DeAndre Hopkins is going to help them win the AFC East? Like, come on. Like, maybe that's
the
why
most a non-quarterback player can affect a win total is like 1 win, like the most. So
yeah, and maybe that's why Mike Tannenbaum didn't work out as a general manager in the NFL, because of thinking like that. Partially joking here. And are they getting D-Hop? AJ, we'll talk about our Bills' opinions on if they're going to get him, but I do think Patriots do have a solid chance as anyone right now of landing Hopkins. Kev, one of the things I read recently was that Tennessee is being the most aggressive at the current moment, and that the Patriots are thought obviously to be in the conversation too because of the money side. But I know Roy is saying no D-Hop, let's move on. But just the only reason we're talking D-Hop right now is because he might be the top weapon on this New England offense when everything comes to play during the regular season at this point. Who knows? We'll see how it works out. But when you're talking about the Patriots, it's really only about their defense at this current moment. Their defense is standout. Like you said, their secondary gets it done. There was a nice little thing I read on Twitter the other day about how back when the Patriots defense was great in the early 2000s, when they had Teddy Bruschi and all these other guys, it was about their linebackers. And now it's about their secondary, their safeties, and how they continue to attack. And they're willing to do 3 safety formations. They might even put 4 safeties on the field at a time. So New England, as long as they have a top 5 defense, they're going to be in games. They're going to win some games that they shouldn't. But it's really all contingent on, can Mac Jones be more than a mid to lower tier quarterback for them? And if he can throw 25 plus touchdowns, maybe the Patriots can surprise some people. But I just don't see it with their current group of guys. They tried to have a big boy offense last year with Mac Jones, and it did not work out. I know there's a lot of people that will make the excuse for Jones, saying he had Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinator and that Joe Judge was working with the offense before Patricia was named the offensive coordinator. But let's be real. They tried to evolve things in year 2 under Mac Jones. There's a reason why when Bailey Zappi was in the game last year, he was able to match the success of what Mac Jones did as a rookie. And that's because it was an overly simplified version of the offense they wanted to run that was based on handing the ball off in very easy reads. And once they went away from that, neither guy could do anything. So I think that's a concern when you don't have quarterbacks that you really think you can have an evolved offense with.
Yeah, producer AJ. I love you, producer AJ. I don't care if you work for the Buffalo Bills someday. You'll always be producer AJ. Producer AJ says, imagine being aggressive for D-Hop with the Bills, or excuse me, the Titans quarterback room. Completely agree with that. I think they're all about marketing. I mean, when it comes to the Titans end of this, it's all about marketing. They've traded some players. They want to have some butts in the seats, and it's a marketing. It's no different than what the Bills did with T.O. And Mario Williams. You just want to have a player there with Derrick Henry too, that you shock some people. You throw D-Hop on that team and they're going to win some AFC South games. I mean, we talk about how weak the AFC South is, and I want to get into that a little bit next week, but we talk about that all the time. And the difference is that division's there for the taking with a couple bad teams. And Ryan Tannehill still might be one of the best quarterbacks in that division, as much as we dog him. I mean, he's going against Trevor Lawrence and some rookies. So there's really, could he come away, take a game from Jacksonville, the next thing you know, win on tiebreakers and win the division? Like, sure. Like it's there for them. So I get why they go D-Hop. I get why it makes sense to them. They have money. They want to put people there. It's all marketing ploy. And maybe, like I said, maybe win one extra game, pull off that Jacksonville game with him or something. And you never know. So I get it on their perspective. Don't love the Titans at all, but I can see what they're thinking. On the Patriots front, makes sense too, because I've been hearing stuff about Juju Smith-Schuster not being healthy. Like there's these new contracts, Mike, that have come into play with Jimmy Garoppolo and others, to where if something in camp, like August, in like the next couple of weeks,
they already got rid of James Robinson. So
yeah, exactly. If they don't like their injury status come 2 weeks from now, they just get caught and they don't get their money. So these new wrinkles on these contracts, and then I think the Garoppolo one's coming to fruition in the next week or two, where he's at going into training camp. But if they don't like the injury progress, there's these new clauses in these deals where it's like, goodbye. So we'll see. I mean, I've heard a little bit of that with Juju about him not being ready and healthy. So the opportunity to go be a receiver one out the gate is interesting, playing in some big games. The Patriots always do and will this year have some pretty big games. So I get him selecting there. These are the two teams that'll probably pay him the most. I know we talked about Detroit and Cleveland, but if he is chasing the bag, it's one of these two teams. So we'll know right off the bat if it's about the money, he's going to one of those two teams. If it's about half the money, half championship, he might go to a different team. If it's about all the championship, he'll go to Bills Chiefs. So maybe someone else, but I think those would be the two leaders in that bucket. So we'll know very quickly which bucket he goes into. And, New England has an interesting mix of like going to be receiver one, playing pretty well as receiver one, and then maybe getting a final contract. I guess that's his goal because he knows he's not going to win there. He's got a small chance to playoffs with the Titans or the Patriots alone, let alone winning anything. So I'm not exactly sure there, but we're going to go to the second AFC team now, Mike, the New York Jets, just by placement purposes, as the Dolphins were a playoff team last year. So we'll get into them next. But the Jets, their addition of Aaron Rodgers, $107 million they've kicked down the road. So they have to do something with that here shortly. What are they going to do? How many years do they expect Aaron Rodgers to play? It's a huge burden to have on the hook because basically he's making a minimum contract this year with 107 burger waiting in the wings. Obviously, they went out and signed his old team. They have pretty much anyone you can think of from that old team. Alan Lazard. He's got the crew back from Green
Randall
Bay
Cobb.
from that. Yeah, Randall Cobb from that non-winning Green Bay team last year. They are there. So, and we've talked many times on the show, and I've talked before about the Jets and their historically healthy defense last year. One of the most historically healthy teams in NFL history in terms of total games lost from a unit were the Jets defense. So that kind of health would be great this year for any team. So, best of wishes to them and that continues for them. But they have to overcome that as well, Mike. They have some good secondary players, but really not a front seven that scares me too much. Let's hear your takes on the Jets, and then I'll go into mine.
I know why you're letting me go first, because you want to tell people why everything I'm about to say is wrong. But I think the Jets are a legitimate contender in the AFC. I'm not saying that they're going to be incredible, but I do think the Jets are a playoff team this season. Last year, their defense was one of the top units in the NFL. DVOA-wise, they were fifth, which is kind of crazy because we were talking about how the Patriots were third, the Bills were fourth, the Jets were fifth. So these were three of the top five defenses in the NFL last year in the AFC East. And I really do believe if the Jets would have just had an average quarterback in 2022, that they would have made the playoffs. Having Mike White and as a guy that you're relying down the stretch is not ideal. They did not have the guys at quarterback to get the job done. And now you bring in a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I know people are going to say, well, he's 40. He's at the end of his career. You're talking about a guy that 2 years ago won the NFL MVP, was back-to-back MVP award winner. And I know his interception totals were up last year. A lot of those were deflections. There was other things that were involved. I don't know if you can count on that happening back-to-back years. Now, if he's truly on a regression, if he gives the Jets 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, that still might be good enough from a Jets perspective to get them to 10, 11 wins this next season. They'll eventually have Breece Hall back. Like you said, he has familiarity with some of the weapons that they're bringing over in Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard. He'll have Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to be a very good wideout in this league. I just think they have the right building blocks to be successful this upcoming season. Yes, they had a lot of injury luck on their defense, and you can't just assume that's going to be the case this year. But I like this team. I'm not picking them ahead of the Bills in the AFC East, but I also wouldn't be surprised if somehow they did finish as the division champs. Now, if you look at Vegas, these are maybe a little bit outdated, but these were numbers from a month ago. they had the Bills as the favorites in the division. They had the Jets second. And for the AFC championship odds, they had the Bills at, I believe, plus 900, tied with the Bengals behind KC. And then the Jets were fourth in the AFC championship odds, which is really telling when a lot of Vegas insiders and odds makers have the Jaguars as a lock to win the AFC South. And you're picking a team finishing second, supposedly in the division, to have better odds of winning the AFC than a team that is considered a lock to win a division. So I like this Jets team. I think they're going to be a challenge for the Bills. But at the end of the day, I still think Buffalo is a better team overall.
And back to Mike Clay's rankings real quick, 9.5 wins. So they're close to what Vegas is thinking. 9.5 wins for Mike Clay. I believe that. I've said 9 to 10 pretty much all offseason. I think that's accurate. I think Aaron Rodgers does elevate enough. Like I said, a really good receiver at most, maybe a game. The difference between Mike White and we'll see what Aaron Rodgers is 2, 3, really good Aaron Rodgers, 4 games difference. So we'll see if they can get up to the 8, 9, 10 win total. I still think there's a lot of question marks. I like this point by RJ a lot. It was what I was alluding to a little bit earlier. The Jets defense with Fish while facing 5 backup quarterbacks and 0 starters missing time. Epic levels of health. Great for them. The Bills have faced that, and equally so. There's been years, forget which season, I don't know if it was 17, 19. I can't remember exactly what year the Bills are very similarly healthy. And that makes a huge difference. The Bengals have had fairly good health in their tradition, in their recent winning tradition, depending on which season you're taking. So it does matter. The Vikings are another team that have been historically healthy through some of their decent years. So if you look at playing, the availability is your best ability. And a lot of times if you're on the field with your full roster, we're all talking about now, Bills, Jets, doesn't really matter. Then you can actually project something. And if you have your full team, that defense was good when ticking on all cylinders. So to me, the Jets are my third place team. I agree with Lauren in terms of saying that. So I've always thought that they will sit in that third place ranking. For me personally, I think they're going to come in at the 9-win mark. Wouldn't be shocked if they got their 10th win. We'll see where that would place them. But right now I see them in that 9th win. I also like this point by Lauren making the fact of a 40-year-old quarterback behind a mid offensive line. Mike Clay gives him a 1 flat, which is toward the bottom of the league in their offensive line unit. So that is a very poor offensive line. They have question marks at the tackle position with Max Mitchell, Dwayne Brown. Will Mekhi Becton ever play? Billy Turner is the guy coming over. So that tackle unit is very poor. Hopefully Tittman converts. Tomlinson's up and down in his career, an ex-49ers bust. And AVT has been a really good player there, but it's been a challenging offensive line to say the least for this roster. Their safety play, they just lost. They traded for Chuck Clark. Now they're going to have to run Jordan Whitehood and Adrian Amos. So there's places to exploit on that team. You know, obviously they're really strong with Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter Jr., Bryce Hall. You know, they have some names there of players that have played in the past, Eccles as well. So we'll see how the secondary works out for them, which their secondary will be their strong suit. But that's some tough safety play. I knocked the Bengals for the same reason,
though, with Sauce and what he can bring to the table. And I understand too, Kev, the point about they were facing backup quarterbacks, but I don't really know if that's really the most legitimate point to make, because we saw it in our own eyes the 2 times the Bills played the Jets last year. The Jets held the Bills to 20 points and 17 points. The Bills averaged 18.5 points against the Jets defense last year, when for the season, they were 28.5 points a game. They were 10 points below their season average in 2 games against the Jets last year. And if you go over the Bills' 16 regular season games, the Bills only failed to score 20 points twice in the entire regular season. And that was once against Miami in the game where they severely outplayed the Dolphins, but weren't able to finish in Dolphins territory often in that heat game down in Florida. And then there was the game against the Jets where they scored 17, where really that was the one game all year outside of playoffs against Cincinnati where I was looking at a defense completely shutting down the Bills' offense. The Bills were destroyed in that game on the road in the Meadowlands. And if Zach Wilson was able to do anything with that Jets offense, New York might have won that game by much more than what they did. Really, their offense wasn't that great, but the Jets defense shut down the Bills offense. And then
but that score in Buffalo was not indicative of that.
I understand, Kevin, but what it is something to say when a team like that holds the Bills under 20 points per game on average in their pair of contests. And this isn't something new that's just to this past season. The Jets, even when they were struggling a couple years ago and going beyond that, have given the Bills offense struggles. We think of the Tyler Bass 6 field goal game in the past when the Bills offense was great during that period of time. So this isn't something just recent. Even when the Jets defense was struggling, they have given the Bills problems. So I'll say this. I don't think the Jets are on the Bills level when I look at their roster, but I do think that they're good enough to split a pair against the Bills. And when you look at what they have on paper, I don't want to proclaim they're definitely going to finish second or they're definitely going to finish third. I think the Jets and Miami are both right on that same tier where it could go either way. And both of them are talented enough to where if the Bills have a bad stretch of games or if the Bills regress, either of them has enough talent to win the division. It's just unlikely that either will.
I mean, the Bills, they ripped Robert Saleh apart when Robert Saleh claimed to not know how good Josh Allen was back his last year of the 49ers. I don't know what you mean by they're historically good against the Bills. 45 points, 27 points. I mean, they ripped them apart in 2021, 2022. They played well in that one win. I'll give them that. They did have a good game plan.
I'm talking about the 6 field goal game in the Meadowlands where the Bills couldn't find.
Yeah, that's the only. Yeah.
But that was in 2020. When the Bills, I know that's going back a while, but what I'm saying is the Jets have had success at limiting him. They've obviously been a bad team throughout the years, but how many teams have even been able to slow down this Bills offense?
Yeah,
in recent years? There's
Saleh
not
let up 72 points last season. I mean, so they've struggled against the Bills mightily in large. They got the snow sleet game where obviously Mike White goes out and then comes back in and plays. And that's actually to their advantage in terms of the weather in that game because it was slowing the offense down once again. But that game wasn't even close at any stage, even if it ends up being a 20-12 win. The Bills just wanted to get out of there with a W in that weather environment. So, to me, I get what you're saying. Like if it all comes together, but I think if it all comes together for any team, they're competitive. I'm looking through the Patriots. Look, we just talked about them. If things all come together, they get D-Hop.
The difference is I'm basically saying the Jets defense is already at the level of defense that
you think it's for sure better than the Patriots defense? For sure.
I would say they're close enough to where what's the difference between the number 3 and the number 5 defense if they're both allowing 20 points a game?
Nothing.
To me, there's very minimal that separates them, except for one of the teams has Aaron Rodgers, who's a future Hall of Famer, and the other one has Mac Jones, who I don't know if he can run an offense more complicated than throwing some screens and some short passes, handing off the ball. A lot of this, I guess, comes down to what do you think of Aaron Rodgers, and do you believe he has anything left in the tank? I'm not saying that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the 2010 version of him or the 2015 version of him, where he's going to throw for 37, 38 touchdowns and throw for 6 picks in a year and be one of the best quarterbacks in football. But I still think he has enough in him to where he's going to throw 27, 28 touchdowns and he's going to get them to 10 wins. I don't think they're going to be an 11, 12, 13 win team. Don't think that that's what I'm saying. But I do think with their defense combined with
where do you have them,
like Rodgers, I don't think their floor is low and I don't think their ceiling is high. I think they're right at 9 to 10 wins, and I don't think they're going to be much better or much worse.
Okay. I actually don't, your final, I don't disagree with that actually. So I agree with that assessment. I think they'll end up with 9. Wouldn't be shocked by 10. Not going to bet against a 10 or 9. Once again, if Aaron Rodgers is a good version of himself, 10 is right there to be had. That 10-7 record. Mike Clay puts him 3rd in the AFC. with a 9.5 and a 7.5 record. So right what we're talking about. So that's his opinion, finishing behind the Miami Dolphins. And that equally so, that Miami Dolphins, same things can be said as we transition to them a little bit. The same thing can be said about them. That's a good football team. We talked about how well that they played the Jets. The Jets played the Bills last year, but the Dolphins, even so, similarly in the first game, the difference was the Bills absolutely blew them out in most statistical categories, except the thing that mattered, which was the scoreboard. In the second game, the Dolphins actually probably played better and came out with an L. Didn't play a good fourth quarter for Miami. They played a good first three quarters. They did not play a good fourth quarter. The Bills dominated in that fourth quarter and took away that win. The Bills played really well in the snow game, where I think that Ken Dorsey had a great snow game plan. And when the snow wasn't there yet, they were a little out of whack. But once that snow came, they absolutely dominated. Converse to the great Miami or the great Cincinnati Bengals debacle I do not think that Ken Dorsey was assuming snow. But they were assuming snow in the Miami Dolphins game. And when it came, they played good. And they did control the game. In the playoff game, I thought they played better than the score again. The one sack fumble, I thought the Dolphins were very opportunistic in the playoffs, got a lot out of Skylar Thompson, the most that they could to maybe show that he is the team's long-term backup quarterback, if that's a thing. I mean, I think he's shown that he could maybe come in and be a spot starter there. But then why did they go out and give aforementioned Mike White the contract to be the number 2 quarterback if he played so well? That's counter to, he played terrible in the playoff game, to be honest. He did as good as he could. He threw that interception down to Kyer Elam. That kind of really changed the course. And the Bills made a lot of good defensive plays, even if they let up points. The offense stopped moving the ball late in that game a little bit. So the Dolphins were there. They did what the Jets weren't able to do. Both teams didn't have a quarterback down the stretch. Tua did lose 4 games in a row. Then face those major concussion issues. We'll see if Tua is back and normal. They went out and got Jalen Ramsey. There's definitely, Mike has them with 11 wins solid. So, that's to predict 11 in a loaded AFC East, a loaded AFC is pretty good. They are favored in a lot of games this year. The only games they're not is their Bills games. Other than that, they're favored in many, many football games this season, according to Mike Clay.
Doesn't he also have them as the 4th best roster in the NFL?
He does.
So, if that's accurate, then Bills fans really should be worrying about it, because what are the Bills? Are they where the Bills rank in terms of roster? 3rd? Are they?
Let's see. After his most recent update, he has them 2nd.
2nd, you said?
Yeah, 2nd. Number 2.
So really, Mike Clay is saying, well, the Dolphins could be in a dogfight with the Bills for the AFC East. And I will say this. I went into last year expecting the Dolphins to be competitive. I picked them to make the playoffs as a wild card, and I thought a lot of Bills fans were underestimating them at that time. I feel like my thoughts were validated based on how last year went in the regular season. Sure, they backdoored their way into the playoffs with the difficult end, but they also missed Tua for many games. That really does have an impact on their final record. And when Tua was healthy, they were one of the elite offenses in the NFL. I know people are going to point down to the stretch of losses before he got his final concussion, which knocked him out for the season. They'll say, well, he was already struggling against San Francisco and LA, and he had the 3 turnovers or 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter against the Packers in a game that he probably shouldn't have ever returned to. But I think the Dolphins are a scary team, but I don't know if, while I said the Jets, I feel pretty comfortable that their floor is low and their ceiling is not low, but the floor and ceiling are close to each other, where they're a 9-10 win team. I think this Dolphins team could be a wide array of possibilities. I think they could win 7 games. I think they could win 13 games, depending on how things go together. And the reason why I'm so mixed on the Dolphins is, first, we don't know the health of Tua when he comes back. Is he one hit from getting a concussion that knocks him out for an entire season? I know you could say that with anybody, but with his concussion history now, he is more vulnerable to getting big hits to the head that can knock him out for sustained periods of time. So a guy like that goes down, the entire Dolphins season could go up in flames. Also, you look at throughout their roster, they have a ton of big name talent. Like you think of Jalen Ramsey, Bradley Chubb. They have Phillips, Xavier Howard, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. So there's talent left and right on this roster, but how is it all going to come together? We know that they have a dynamic offense that is able to spread teams out and able to get guys down the field with their speed and really create matchup problems for opposing defenses. But how is their defense going to look this upcoming season? I know a lot of outsiders, a lot of people in national media are assuming that with Jalen Ramsey in the fold, that their defense is going to be dangerous, that their defense is going to be good. But they really didn't show that last year, Kev. The Dolphins' defense was one of the weaknesses of their team. And yes, they were very aggressive at times and were opportunistic against the Bills in the wild card game. But a lot of that was by necessity. They knew if they didn't blitz Allen and they knew if they didn't force turnovers and takeaways, that they didn't have a chance of slowing down the Bills' offense. So they essentially had to play that style of football. And it worked to some limited success. Like they scored a touchdown off the fumble recovery. They had a couple interceptions. But that's also part of the reason why they were allowing a lot of big plays and why the Bills were able to put a ton of yardage up on them last year. So when I look at Miami, I think you're looking at a team that's going to be battling with the Jets for second in the division, outside chance of going for the division crown. I don't think they're at the Bills level yet either, Kev. I'm just going to say it. Their weapons scare me. I would take Hill and Waddle on my team any day of the week, but I don't know if they have a rounded enough team to take down the Bills and take this division from them yet.
Yeah, I mean, they do. So the AFC East, per Mike Clay, is the best division in football. As you know, their projected total wins come in at 38 wins, which would be the most in football. So they do believe that it is the best division in football. And that's, the difference is there that even New England has a chance to come 8-9 wins, and really the bottom of the division being so strong will eliminate the need for like having a really bad team in it that you can beat up twice a year on. And some of these, I don't know that the Patriots can be more than 2-4 in the division this year, but those are going to be, all 6 of those are most likely, outside of something happening, dog fights for all the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills in those games. So I do think it usually takes a really strong offense to beat the New England Patriots handedly. They're always going to come. They're always going to take away your best. And if you don't have one of the best, it's really hard to consistently beat that team, as the Jets have found out. Like, another stat on the Dolphins that I found super interesting, they're 4-15 against the Bills since 2013. I didn't realize it was that. I knew it was lopsided lately. I didn't realize it was that bad. One of the only losses of Josh Allen was that Charles Clay drop in the meaningless 2018 season. And then obviously the great Heat game of 2022. Beside that, like, they don't have much success against Josh Allen specifically, or the Buffalo Bills. So conversely to your Jets argument would be the Dolphins. They did pull one out last year, but they don't find much success against Josh Allen. 34 points, 32 points, 21 points, 26 points, 35 points, 56 points, 31, 37, 31, 42. These are all under Josh Allen. And then the Charles Clay drop. That's a lot of football points.
That their fan base is so confident that they're going to take over this division, because I think most rational Bills fans look at this division and they see the Jets and they see the Dolphins, and they respect their rosters. They respect what they can bring to the table. But when you've won the division 3 consecutive years, you return the majority of that roster minus Tremaine Edmonds, essentially, and you even improve the depth and bring in some starters from other teams. The gap was 4 wins last year, 13 for the Buffalo, 9 for Miami. Now, if you're a Miami fan and you're saying you're going to win the division, well, you're saying the Bills are going to come down to earth a little bit, and then you're going to have to improve as well. So are the Bills falling to be an 11-win team this year? Are they going to be a 10-win team? Is Miami going to get to 11 and Bills at 10? You're expecting a lot of changes here. So I understand why Miami fans look at their roster and they say, we're ready for it. But don't just dismiss the Bills because they haven't won a Super Bowl yet. I feel like what is happening with so many of the fan bases across the league right now, they've gotten tired of hearing about the Bills the last 3 years and about how great Josh Allen is and how they're the next big threat to the Kansas City Chiefs, while Cincinnati has come and also become one of those threats. And basically they have mistaken that because the Bills have fallen short in the playoffs, that the Bills' window is narrowing or that they are not ever going to be good enough to win a championship. And when you look at the DVOAs for the Bills the last 3 seasons, they were number 4 in 2020, number 2 in 2021, and then number 1 last year in DVOA. DVOA is telling you who are the best teams in football, who is consistently the best teams in football during the course of the season on a yearly basis. And the Bills, normally there's a lot of variance. Even good teams might go from 2nd to 8th to 5th to 3rd. And there's ups and downs, peaks and valleys. The Bills have not had those drops in the last 3 years. They've gotten better overall. So when Dolphins fans and Jets fans come and start questioning the Bills and questioning their window to win going forward, I guess my response back to them is, why would you expect one of the most consistent teams in football over the course of the last 4 years to suddenly have this random decline with the same group of players that they have, with the franchise quarterback that they have, with the great defensive-minded head coach that they have, while they also found a way to improve their offensive line, which was a weakness, improving the slot position, which was a weakness, in getting healthier on defense, which was a problem last year. It defies a lot of logic. Now, if you want to tell me 2-3 years from now, maybe the Bills aren't a 13-14 win team, maybe they fall to be a 10-win team or 11-win team because some of our guys have gotten older and we've had to make difficult salary cap decisions, and you want to project that, fine. But don't tell me that's the end of the window, because as long as you're making the playoffs, you still have that window. So I have this respect for the division rivals. All 4 of these teams in the AFC East know how to win football games. But I'm just baffled by the lack of respect that the Bills have had from a national perspective and from these rival fan bases who, honestly, they've had their butts kicked by the Bills the last 3 years. You'd think they would have a little bit more of humbleness to them after the last 3 seasons, but maybe that's just what we do now. We just talk crap about whoever's at the top. And I understand the Bills haven't won jack crap lately, but they've still won playoff games the last 3 years, and they've won 4 playoff games during that span. And there's some franchises in the NFL that have never been able to do that in their entire history. So there is some respect that the Bills deserve that they're not getting right now.
And Mike Clay actually ranks, as you said, the 4th most wins, but the second, tied with the Bills for the second best roster. Mike Clay absolutely loves the Dolphins, sure receivers, but loves their defense. Absolutely thinks it's a fantastic defense with Vic Fangio, Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Akader Kahu, Deshaun Elliott, Javian Holland, the Snowman, Christian Wilkins, Zach Seiler, Raekwon Davis, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Manuel Ogba, Jerome Baker. They feel like that is basically matches the Bills pound for pound in pretty much every position group except tight end. They don't really like their running backs very much there with Jeff Wilson and Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. The O-line's about equal with the Bills. Obviously, quarterback's a downgrade, but no tight end on the roster. Durham Smythe is their starting tight end. So there's definitely no real 12 personnel usage there. They don't go very deep at the receiver position. Obviously, they have the 2 studs that any team would love to have in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but Braxton Berrios and Chosen Robinson and it's just overpaid Cedric Will. There's just not a lot there, and there's no pass catchers there except their top 2 players. So they lose one of them. They really are in some big offensive trouble in a hurry, as teams could then just zone in on the other top receiver. As they're really their only weapon. So they have to, is more so than any other team, they need to keep those 2 receivers healthy, because maybe they're one of their best weapons in Trent Sherfield is now a Bill. They really don't have much behind their top 2 guys. So very, very interesting proposition there. And the Miami offense is not as good as we would assume for having 2 premier receivers, an average O-line, no tight ends, no depth at receiver, some average running backs. it's going to be an interesting unit, and then all reliant on Tua's health. So it's going to be a pretty rocky offense. If Tua's fully healthy and balling, I mean, I'm sure he has two great receivers. He can get it done, but he does not have a large supporting cast beside a really good 1-2 and not a lot else. But that defense should be able to help.
Maybe the highest variance team in this division right now. You're talking
Mike
about
Clay's buying them. Mike Clay is buying.
I'll say this: I'm buying that they're good. I'm not buying that they're great. If you look at the team, if everything clicks, say this defense plays to their potential with some of their big names that they have. Oh, they could be a 13-win team, Kev, with sure. Some of the guys that they have. If the Dolphins are able to establish a pass rush with some of their front four, which they have some guys that can get to the quarterback, that with that secondary, with those guys, if they could have a top 5 defense that is able to create takeaways, and you have a healthy Tua, Miami could be fantastic. But the Bills are also fantastic, so that doesn't even mean, even if Miami is fantastic, they're not a shoo-in to win the division. Same with the Jets. It's just, what are we going to see from the Dolphins? Is it going to be the version that we saw during their hot streaks last year? Or are we going to see a team that's going to go up and down and be wildly inconsistent? Because while the Dolphins offense was tremendous last year, they were streaky. And when you have an offense designed around 2 flashy wide receivers and a quarterback that has health issues at times, you're going to be up and down. And that's not normally a steady path to winning a lot of games. That's normally the path where you confuse and trick people into believing you're one of the best teams in football. And then the next week you lose to a 4-win team in a disappointment on the road. So I love what the Dolphins have. I just can't. It comes down to this, Kev. I like what the Dolphins and Jets have, but they haven't shown it yet. They haven't put it all together.
But sometimes that's the most trendy thing. Sometimes that's the trendiest thing.
It's easy to, and no one ever wants to be the guy that consistently bets on the same teams or picks the same teams. People have been picking the Bills for 3 years. They want to switch it up. They want to go the trendy direction to say, yeah, I picked the Bills to have a little bit of a downfall. I was behind the Dolphins before anyone else was. I was with the Jets before anyone else was. So I get it. Like, I understand why a lot of people are picking them and getting on their bandwagons. But I do think they have to prove it before I'm going to start saying they're ahead of the Bills.
Thanks for coming in after the huddle. Appreciate your perspective. It depends on the season. Last year, a little bit probably did. The Bills offensive line did hold them back from winning. 2 years ago, it was a special teams blunder and a special teams blunder only. 3 years ago, the Chiefs were just better. That was a really good football team, and they actually just went on to lose. Depending on the season, but 2 years ago, there was really no, if anything, a little defensive lapse. They lost Trey White, couldn't guard Chiefs receivers, and then a special teams blunder. So not really the offensive line. Last year, a little bit more, but the Bills went out and obviously totally rehauled the interior, brought in their hand-picked guard, Connor McGovern, a big boy, one of the best right guard prospects in a while, and Osiris Torrance. Still have Mitch Morse, brought in David Edwards with Super Bowl pedigree. Still have Ike Butker and obviously Ryan Bates is versatile. So their interior is very good. It is a very good line. The left tackle is good, and Deion Dawkins. If that right tackle can play competent football, it's now going to be much better offensive line all across the board with Brandon Shell, a guy from Miami. They're backing him up. So, okay, Mike, lastly, so you have, obviously I know what you have. You have the Patriots, Dolphins, Jets, Bills. I have the Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Bills. So we just have a little bit of a flip there in the middle. I got 8-9 for the Patriots and 9-8 for the Jets, 10-7 for the Dolphins. So that's the way that I 12-5 for the Bills. So that's the way that I have it shaking out there in the AFC. Mike, I'm assuming you have something similar with the Jets and the Patriots, or the Jets and the Dolphins switched there in the middle. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty close to correct. I'll say right now the Patriots as a 7-win team. If I was just making a projection,
real quick.
I'll have Miami and the Jets both at 10 wins. I know that's probably not realistic, but I consider them even right now. So even though I give the Jets a slight edge, I think that's an even matchup. And then I'll say the Bills are probably around 12 wins at this current point because I do think it's going to be
we have the same thing. You just have the Jets winning the Patriots game to give them 10. I have them splitting with the Patriots. That's literally like one of our only differences probably. Yeah. To get to that 10th win for the Jets and knocking the Patriots down to just 7 wins in your prediction. So
and when and just to wrap it up from my side, Kev, I know you have to get going soon. If I'm looking at the AFC East, I think we're looking at 3 of the better teams in the entire conference. Obviously, Kansas City is a power. Cincinnati is a power. But if you're asking me, where do the Jets and the Dolphins rack up compared to the second and third tier teams in the conference? I think the Jets and Dolphins are every bit as good as the LA Chargers, as the Baltimore Ravens, some people, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and so forth. So realistically, we're talking, I think the Jets and the Dolphins could be anywhere from the 4th to 7th best teams in the conference going into the season. Now, what are the odds of 3 teams from the AFC East making the playoffs? Not likely, especially with the schedules of all the teams in the division this year. But I would almost guarantee you're going to get at least 2 teams from the AFC East in the playoffs this upcoming season.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that there's potentially the 4th, 5th, and 6th best teams in the AFC, or I should say the 4th and the 5th, and then the 1st. So potential or 2nd, or 3rd. So potentially you have 3 of the top 5. I agree. Adding in Cincinnati and KC, and then right there with right below them Baltimore. And maybe some other Jacksonville and a few others, depending on where you have different teams. Maybe Cleveland pops up in there, but that's generally the Chargers. That's generally the ranking that I would have as well. But will these teams stay healthy enough? Will they cannibalize each other? Will one of them get knocked out of the playoffs, tiebreakers, etc.? It could be just 2. It is a possibility of 3 teams, though. And would it be an outlandish world if the Patriots could sneak in the 7 seed and do some crazy things? They've done it in the past underneath Bill Belichick. We'll see if they have enough. They sign Hopkins. You never really know if they could sneak into one of that final spot. So a lot to look out for in one of the best divisions in football, finally, with the Bills on top of that division in a lot of metrics. But if you wouldn't mind, smash that like button. It means a ton to us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's great to be back. We'll all be together in 2 weeks from now, making content with all the Cover One Sports Network crew. You have Eric, you have Greg, everyone coming over there. You have Thomas, you have a couple other guys showing up to training camp coverage. We'll be there the whole first week. We'll be making some crossover content, some cool stuff at camp. We'll all be together to bring you the best coverage from afar that's possible, and we'll be right up close and personal. As always, the film room's got Daquan Jones coming on, as we've had some great guests, most recently Kyron Elam and a couple others. So make sure you tune into the film room as well with Eric and Ant and all of our great Cover One shows. So smash that like button. It helps us bring great content and great guests and great giveaways, and look forward to meeting some of you guys at training camp. So that's a wrap on the Going Deep podcast, Tuesday at 7 edition. Great to be back with you, but we'll be right back here, maybe with an overall AFC rankings from Kevin and Mike next week, and then training camp preview, and then training camp news and notes and nuggets the following week. So we got the schedule played out for you guys, and we look really forward to continuing this conversation and having some elaborate discussions as soon as next week into some great crossover content with our other shows coming up here at the end of July. So it's all coming up quick. 2 weeks from now, we'll be live with you with some actual news. Who's hurt? Who's looking good? Who's the starting lineup? How's the depth chart shaking out? How's it going to look in the preseason and scrimmage? So we'll be at you and have all that coverage for you here soon in a couple of weeks. But from the Going Deep podcast, I'm Kevin. That's Mike. We'll catch you live here Tuesdays at 7 for the foreseeable future and all throughout the season.
Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown. Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.